This episode is brought to you by the RVA Podcast Network. Find more information at rvapodcast.org.
Season 3 of The Pass is here. I know it's long overdue. We have a new intro. We still got the same content. Well, actually, it's a little bit of new content because there's new things going on in 2019. So buckle up. We got a lot of things to talk about on The Pass. What is up? What's going on, y'all? Episode 259 of The Pass is here. I am your host, BT. Not going to really give you all the fluff and bluff at the beginning, other than letting you know that if you are in the local RVA area or Richmond, VA, we do have a podcast network that I just recently joined. Great group, great resources, good promotion, and the best part, it's free. So if you want to participate in that, just reach out and I can definitely get your info if you're currently an active podcaster or looking to get into podcasting. Without any further ado, I do have a guest on the show. I do have her on speakerphone, so if we're gonna hope that the sound does not go bananas or crazy, and give this another try. And I like to, as I always tell people, anyone that comes on as a guest, I let them introduce themselves. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you introduce yourself, and this may segue or turn into a bit of a interview based pod, but for a good reason, and I'll explain later on. So if you want to introduce yourself whenever you're ready.
Hey guys, my name is Dani Alexandria. I am a singer-songwriter, entrepreneur, and disability advocate.
All right. So she does it all. True. If there's anything that I could say that I do know about you, especially in the videos that I have seen, you're definitely a content creator. I will give you that, like, on every level. Like, you have the dedication that I'm working to get towards. So trust me, it's definitely valued, and, you know, continue building. Like, that's, and we'll, like I said, I'll make that'll probably be in my pass the message, and we'll get to that later on. I got like fun, like I said, it's a whole lot of stuff, like with the show. I tell people this all the time. Like, there literally is like a massive routine to everything that I do with the brand. So we'll go into that as we continue the podcast. So last Tuesday there was this thing that came on. I don't know if any of our listeners may be aware, but Apple did their keynote, and Apple wanted to mainly use it as a stepping stone to present the iPhone 11. And of course, everything comes in threes now, so we'll get into that bit later on. But there were some other products, other things that were introduced. And the first thing that was talked about was the Apple Arcade. And your thoughts on the arcade, yay or nay? Maybe?
I'm somewhere in the middle. I can see maybe the value for younger kids. Like, I have a 12-year-old brother. Mm-hmm. I could see where parents might like the fact that you can pay and not have like those in-app purchases and not have to worry about your kids like spending hundreds of dollars on a game and it's your money and not theirs kind of situation. But at the same time, I also feel like maybe I'm not the target market and I'm just completely oblivious to this, but like mobile gaming is just not as entertaining. Like, if I'm going to be spending $5 a month, I'd rather, pick up a Switch.
Right.
Or any of my other various consoles and put that money towards that kind of stuff and have dedicated like gaming instead of everything on my phone.
Right. That's fair. And me being a hardcore gamer, and I will admit there are a few, there was a game that I was introduced to a couple of weeks ago, and I'll play that online every once in a while, but it's nothing that I'm like sticking to, like, oh, I gotta pick up my phone and I have to play this game. So that kind of ties into the confirmation of, if there's a game of that magnitude already available, there's no need in me, jumping out and paying for a subscription service for games that I may not even touch. So that's kind of that's kind of like we're kind of on the same page with that one. The Apple TV. Now, I didn't when we did the initial recording, I didn't mention this, but I'm going to talk about it now. Apple TV Plus, why they're kind of giving it a big push, and you probably already know this, and the listeners may not recall me mentioning this before because they did a keynote kind of teasing Apple TV before. They have a big name behind it, and they're hoping that she can kind of be the face to help it get to its next level. You probably know what I'm talking about.
Oh, Miss Oprah.
Yeah. You know Oprah, and, I mean, if you get Oprah's book club off rip, then that's already, because that was, I mean, I know she was talking, now I want to make sure I remember this right, because I know she was there for the book section of Apple, but they also want her to kind of get her she's looking to get hands-on with the TV portion and kind of participating as well. Do you think that's going to get more people to support that product?
I mean, yes, but Oprah has the, I guess, buying power for people. If she puts her name on anything, there'll be people who will check it out. But with the amount of streaming services that are already available and that are coming by the end of the year, I feel like what's going to happen is a lot of people are just going to have like this piecemeal effect. So let's say you like Stranger Things on Netflix and you like, I don't know, some Disney movies and you want to see the Oprah thing on Apple TV Plus.
Right.
People are going to just start like, let me pay for 1 month of Netflix, watch Stranger Things, then cancel, then move over to Apple, watch whatever I want to watch, then cancel, then move over to Disney and just keep going like that. Because the entire purpose of streaming was to be cheaper than cable, but if you get all of these different streaming services, you might as well just have cable.
Right. Because the average cable consumer may hit 30 channels tops out of the hundreds of channels that you have available. And that's no different than with the streaming services because, like you said, if I have my go-to shows on Netflix, on Disney, on Amazon, then I'm not really pressed to say, hey, I need to be a part of this show or I need to, look at these other shows on here if they're not going to be shows that appeal to me or suitable for my viewing or listening. It's kind of, and it's tough because it's almost, and I don't want to use this comparison because it's a little off, but it kind of fits. It's like podcasts. There are hundreds of thousands of podcasters who exist. Every podcaster is going to, like every podcast right now has or is going to do a topic or a conversation piece about the Apple Keynote. Do you want to hear the keynote from every single podcaster? Or is it like, hey, this is my favorite podcast, so I'm going to listen to their point of view about it, and I'm good. And that's kind of where we are with the streaming wars, the streaming services, is that there are so many folks that have streaming available that trying to buy or be a part of each one of them is just a challenge. Where
I think Apple is going right is with this 1 year free situation.
Yes.
So if you buy any new Apple product, you get a free year of Apple TV Plus. That's the better way to do it because people are willing to have it then and maybe they'll get used to having it in their life and then not want to cancel. It's kind of like Amazon Prime Video. I would never pay for Amazon Prime Video on its own. But I like Amazon Prime. I like my fast shipping.
Yes.
So if I get this extra perk of these videos, cool. Otherwise, I'm not getting it.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of it, and Prime has become a big takeover in ways that I never would have expected, but we're here because that's just what Prime does. We're gonna leave the software side and kind of chip at the hardware. Let me make sure I remember, the actual iPad has gotten a facelift, and that's coming out soon. And a lot of people...
Yeah, so it's not the iPad Air, it's not the iPad Pro, it's just the iPad.
Regular iPad. Yeah, because they said it was overdue for... They hadn't did a revision on it in a couple years, right? Okay. Do you know anyone do you feel like, because I know you mentioned it, you may have mentioned it before, but correct me if I'm wrong. Does this iPad feel good enough to be, I won't say moved off the shelves quickly, but is it going to be worth its bang for its buck when it drops?
For the right market, yes.
Okay.
I think that Apple needs to condense its product line. There's too many because now we have the iPad Mini, the iPad Air, and the iPad Pro.
Right.
We don't need that many options. They seem to overlap a lot. But pretty much just get rid of the Air because it's useless. Everything else is fine. So you have the Mini for the people who just need like a small little tablet. The regular iPad is for the everyday person. They are right in comparing it to laptops because a lot of the functions that people used to do on laptops can be done very, very well on a regular iPad. So this would be good for schools, for students, for kids in general. It's a great way for they have all the functions of an iPhone without buying a phone. But I think that Apple just doesn't know where it wants to go with the iPad. It's trying to push the line too much towards the laptop, and everything's just getting blurred.
Yes. And the storage, and what makes it even more interesting to add to that, your storage options have always been far and few with the iPad. Because this one, you're only getting 32 and 128, which is completely fine because in some cases, you really may not need to put that much stuff on your iPad, but you also may be using your iPad for a lot of apps or just actual photos or things of that sort. So then that's where that 128 comes into play. And the prices, because I just checked on the site kind of quickly to remember, the prices are starting at $329, and I think the iPad for 128 without the data is $429, which isn't. I mean, that's not a bad price, especially compared to the other ones that they have released.
Let me see what it is in Canadian. For us here, the 32 gigabyte is $429, and then the 128 is $550, basically.
Gotcha.
So again, that's where it kind of comes into the blurring of the lines, because you could probably get a pretty decent Chromebook type computer for $500.
Right. Yeah, that's
with more storage.
Yeah, because that's my big takeaway. It's always going to come back to storage, because when phones, a couple years ago, having a device that had 16 gigs, you thought you were doing something. You're like, 16 gigs, I can work with that. But now we keep so many apps or run so many programs, or between the average user, I would say probably does at least 10 screenshots a day on mobile devices, and that's a minimum.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be more or it could be less. That's obvious, but in this case, you have those users in that regard. So to have that much storage and have that repeat usage is kind of going to be a big factor in the product itself.
Yeah, because again, they push a lot towards students. And if they're comparing it to the top 90% of laptops, I'm thinking of if a student is sitting there for their whole year worth of work, they're taking pictures, they're taking videos, they're writing essays. That's not a lot of storage.
Right.
At all.
Yeah.
And it's not like it has more than one port, especially with the lower end ones. Even if the iPad Pro has got 2 USB-Cs, it's okay, you can add a hard drive.
Yeah. But, and ports are another thing. The port thing is a huge tangent for me, because we had mentioned it when we did the other recording. I'm very indifferent about USB-C, or just the limitation of, okay, your USB ports are gone. And I know most third-party companies are making devices to say, hey, we can give you something to use so that you're not unable to use these products. But we were just using the Yeti. Hooking up the Yeti, you got to get a USB-C adapter to USB and all that. So it's those things are a key factor in your product. And if I remember correctly, I know when everyone was it was speculation being made whether the new iPad was going to go USB-C. Personally, I'm kind of glad it didn't, but I also know if it did, it wouldn't be the worst idea because of most of the Macs being USB-C available.
I like USB-C. I think the problem with USB-C is that people are so unwilling to change that it then becomes a problem. If everyone just stopped and decided everything's going to USB-C, life would be so much easier.
Right.
I never really had a huge problem with USB-C. Like, for example, I have the Blue Yeti Pro, so that goes into my mixer. And my mixer, which I got way before any of my other devices had USB-C, came with both a USB-A cable and a USB-C cable.
Okay. So
it wasn't a problem.
Right.
But I do see where, like, even something as simple as plugging in my iPhone into my MacBook required a whole different cable.
Right.
So if everyone uses one port, the one port would work. But if we're going to keep being fragmented, then USB-C doesn't work. Yeah,
it's got to be streamlined. I think the streamline is where it's a big transition. Because I know for me, when I think I bought the iPhone 6, and the 6 had the headphone jack. I was like, all right, cool, we good. When I got the 7 Plus, I was like, oh, so I don't have a I don't have a headphone jack anymore. It wasn't the end of the world because in most cases I was already using Bluetooth headphones anyway. So it didn't deter me as bad. Like like you said, the change factor was big for some people because it's like, oh my God, we don't have a headphone jack. What are we going to do? But you either get with the program or you use your resources. And that's basically what ended up happening.
Yeah. Nobody complains about it as much anymore because there was this huge push when they got rid of the headphone jack for everyone to go wireless with headphones.
Yeah. I mean, wireless became the trend by then. So that helped out big time. Next up was the Apple Watch. How do you feel about the watch? Because I'm still, like, I'm behind. Like, I'm old. I got like the first series and I've been fine with it, but I also don't use the watch to its maximum potential either.
I used to use the watch to its maximum potential until I got injured. And I was very skeptical at first. When Apple first came out with the Apple Watch, I was like, why do I need this?
Right.
I really don't need it. And the only reason why I ended up getting one was because there was a really good deal on it here in Canada, and we could pay like $50 a month through like something called the shopping channel.
Right.
With like no interest. It was great. And I got it, and it changed my world. Okay. I don't know if it's like my own learning disabilities or like my ADHD, but it helped me pare down my notifications. If I'm doing work and like someone texts me or something, I can glance at it. Is it important? Then I can answer it. If it's not important, then I just leave it versus me having to pick up my phone and then all of a sudden I'm on Instagram and Facebook for 2 hours instead of doing what I need to do. I also really, really love a lot of the health features that they have. Like the heart rate monitor helps me personally with like my panic attacks because it'll keep notifying me that like my heart rate's going up. And that kind of triggers in my head. I'm like, okay, why am I getting anxious? Let me start calming down now before I already have a panic attack and I can't calm myself down.
Right.
And things like the fall detection and all that kind of stuff for other types of people, that can be life-changing. It really can.
Yeah.
It's peace of mind. It's just an extra, it's almost the same thing like Tesla's autopilot. Like you need to still be driving in a way, but it's just that like extra pair of eyes.
Okay. Everything you just said, those are factors I didn't even put into consideration, but that's, wow. Like the notification thing, cause this is my little mini promo. I've become a fan of working on being present, and not everyone knows how to be present when they have a phone, because by nature, our phones are our lives. Totally get it. I got no problem with it. The thing is, when you're out with someone and you're trying to have like an actually in-depth, realistic, true heart-to-heart conversation, and the person you're in front of is just text, scroll. Some cases you're being heard and you're listened to and it can generate dialogue. Other times, the person is more in tune with the phone. So that therein, where the watch can be helpful with that, I never would have, I've thought about it, but I didn't realize it to that extent, because in most cases, and I'm guilty of it, and anyone that knows me, they hear me say this through and through, I am the do not disturb pro. Like, you really have to make a VIP, or not VIP, but you got to be really close with me to be on I'm going to text you a call. Like, if you call, your call will get through. But yeah, with the watch, that's actually not a bad way to look at it, with notifications, and obviously, like you said, with health, with keeping things under wraps. Because I used to use the breathe portion was great at one point, and I used it a lot, and then I just stopped.
Same.
So I'm that may be a reminder or a way of learning how to be more accountable with working on that. So that's a good tip, a good piece of advice to share.
Yeah, it's almost like a barrier. Like, for example, you're not going to send a 3-paragraph text message on your Apple Watch. Like, that's just annoying.
Absolutely.
So by having it, I noticed that I keep I leave my phone wherever I drop it when I get home, and I just walk around with my watch on my wrist.
Right.
So it's just that it's almost a barrier to entry onto your phone to keep you more focused.
And that also helps you with being productive with doing other stuff. I never thought about it like that. I'm paraphrasing that obviously, but that would be helpful in regards to if you don't want to be as, like you said, tied to the phone. It's giving you that outlet of, okay, let me focus on what I'm doing and not feel like I have to be, quote unquote, chained or connected to my phone. Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. We are in the home stretch of the keynote, and I have another part that I'm going to get into because we've talked about this off air too. Before we get into the iPhone, which is probably what everybody wants to hear, I have talked to you and I have listened, and like I said, I'm nosy, but I'm also, it's just part of content. You're a big music person or big music listener.
Yeah.
One, and I don't know if you did have a chance to yesterday. Yesterday might be one of the first Fridays in a while that I did not find any good music on any streaming platforms, which shocked me. And it could have been it could be what I like to listen to as well. But have you, like, in the last couple of months, have you found or caught any good songs or albums that have kind of like struck your ear?
Yes, but only because I actively follow specific artists.
Okay.
And know when their music comes out. Like, I use streaming in the weirdest way possible, where I don't really do the whole playlist thing. I don't really discover music that way. Mm-hmm. Even though I'm trying to get back into it.
Okay.
Because I've actually come across a lot of frustration with streaming that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about right now. It specifically became a pain point because I got my iPod replaced. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that some of the music that I already had downloaded is now grayed out and saying it's not available in my region. Gotcha. Even though this is music that I know that I already owned years and years ago. Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So that's a little concerning.
Yeah.
Because it's like they can take away access to your music. Actually, specifically one that I noticed, and I know exactly why it's no longer available, was a Pussycat Doll song that featured R. Kelly.
Okay.
So the rest of the album is
available.
Yeah,
I got you.
That one song.
Got you. Okay, so that was we're not having any R. Kelly music, so anything that was affiliated with it is gone. Dang, that's
Yes.
yeah, that's a rough.
And I was in shock. I was like, that's not okay. Like, that should be my choice,
Right.
not Apple's choice.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because like I have every song that I've ever listened to since I was about 7 years old on my iPod at all times.
Gotcha.
So you have everything from literally Hannah Montana to like whatever is current and recent right now.
Okay.
And that's a scary thought. Like that you really don't own your music when you're doing that. You're renting it.
Pretty much, yeah. That's true.
And when you're renting it, you have no control over it.
Right. Because it's being regulated in a sense, even though you're using this said platform to get your streaming service from them, but you don't have access to like maintain or uphold it. Like right now, there are multiple episodes of The Office that I had downloaded. Don't know where they are, but I had a huge collection of The Office videos. That was at the time before we got to the streaming stage and before like I was actually buying like the videos and all that stuff. So it's tough. Okay, so that gives a good outset with music and with your listens. And one last thing, do you, since because we both own Macs, do you feel as though the new transition of iTunes being split is going to help Apple or is it going to hurt them?
It's going to help them.
Okay.
I actually made a whole video about this on my YouTube channel, but it's not as scary as it seems. Okay. It makes sense because a lot of my pain points with iTunes is that it doesn't work with your phone properly anymore because there are 3 separate apps on your phone and only 1 app on your computer.
Right.
So, for example, my podcast, I can start a podcast on my iPhone and then try and go, like when I sit down at my iMac and listen to it, and it hasn't even saved the place that I was at.
That's true.
And you also have to, like, go to this drop-down menu and switch over to podcast, and it's so clunky. It's just ridiculously clunky. So I'm glad that that's what they're doing. I know that the way that Apple does things is going to be completely seamless. So all of your music is going to be there. Right. All of your podcast is going to be in the podcast app. Everything is going to be fine. You're barely going to notice it. It's just that now 3 different apps you'll have to open instead of one giant one.
Right. That's true. That's valid. I mean, that is probably one of the biggest reasons why because a lot of people gave me grief for it at the time. It was like I left Apple Music and I went to Spotify. If there's nothing else that I value more than anything with Spotify is that I can listen to my Spotify music anywhere. Like if I'm on my tablet, if it was playing on my phone and I want to go to my tablet to continue playing it, it'll play right where it left off. If I'm on my Xbox, it'll pick up. If I'm on my speaker, I'm not gonna say her name, it'll pick up there. It literally just flows across different platforms. So that part of it is very underused, whether people realize it or not. And that's something that hopefully Apple, if Apple has that feature in mind of putting everything separate and it's going to give you that consistency, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, Apple's the king of that. Like Handoff, have you used Handoff? Handoff is magical.
Yeah, Handoff was literally was a whole new day for me. Because I was so used to, like, whenever, like, for instance, with podcasts, if I'm working on an image and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make this image on Canva, and then when I finish it, I'm going to upload it, save it on my computer. Trying to get it from the computer to the phone without Handoff, it is so annoying. You almost like, you got to email it to yourself or something. But now it's like, okay, Handoff, cool. Here's my phone, send it to my phone, done. I don't have to go through a whole lot of hoopla. Like, even now, like, when people record, like, a person takes a picture and you're out at a gathering and people have iPhones. Oh, all y'all got iPhones? Turn on your AirDrop, and I'll drop it to each one of you.
Yep.
So,
I have a secret resentment for any Breed Bubble friends because it just makes my life so much harder. Like, you start a group chat, and then you can't have a group chat because one person has an Android phone. Not that I'm saying that, like, iPhones are better than Androids or whatever. Like, I don't actually care what your phone is, but it's just the seamlessness of the whole ecosystem with Apple.
The ecosystem and the cohesion has been the biggest thing that I've heard people say with Apple. That's kind of always been what I've heard, but when I experienced it, I was like, oh, this is why a lot of people have that fear or that concern of leaving Apple to go to Android, or getting rid of a Mac to go to Windows. Something. I mean, I'm just hypothetically speaking. I'm not saying people like really have done those, but if times that it has actually occurred, it's very life changing for that.
Like, even something as simple, I'm typing up an email. I know that the person just sent me an email. Instead of trying to go into mail, all of that, be complicated, I pick up my phone, their email's right there, I copy it on my phone, and can paste it on my computer. Right.
Exactly. I still need to give mail a try. I'm not gonna lie, because I think I'm like hardcore Gmail. That's part of it. But I have the mail app, but I haven't used it as much as I used to. Now, calendar is a little different, as far as that goes. Since we're app hopping through our phone, technically, we'll go ahead and jump into the big granddaddy of them all. iPhone brought out the iPhone 11, the iPhone 11 Pro, and the iPhone 11 Pro Max, if I remember the names correctly.
Yep. And I would like to know who is naming these things, because whoever it is, I need to have a conversation with them. Oh,
they're running out of options. They're running out of names and options on how to come up with simplifying these specific brands for what they are doing, or coming up trying to first of all, because you said something earlier, and it's proof of where we are in the post Steve Jobs era. Because in all honesty, if you're wanting to stay consistent with what works, you really only need two phones. You would just need the iPhone 11 and the iPhone 11 Plus, and that's it. You don't need the 11 Pro Max Ultra Ultimate Combo Deluxe Special. You just need a phone. Because most people, this is what I mentioned earlier before the recording hiccups. Everything for the last few years, the presentation has always been being innovative, doing cutting edge, the next level. There's not but so much you can throw into a phone because the average user isn't going to be looking at half of what's being presented in that keynote. They can care less about all that stuff.
Yeah.
Most of them just want the phone to turn on. They want to be able to check text messages. They want to be able to browse the web. They want the number one demand that everybody always wants is, I want my phone to last the duration of my day, which is humanly impossible, only because people use their phones like they use a computer. If you're running 40 apps a day, all in the background, and you're going back and forth between stuff, I don't know how you expect your phone to keep up with you or with the speed that you're using it. And that's how people's phones are dying by the second. It's kind of almost and I'm using this theory, and I didn't mean to cut you off. It's almost equivalent to the theory of, my phone is at 5%. Let me scroll these other 400 pages on Facebook or Twitter. And when my phone gets to 1%, not only am I going to plug it in to charge, but I'm not going to let it properly charge. I'm going to use the phone while it's charging, so the phone isn't getting its proper, cool down or rest time. And it causes the phone to get pushed even more to its limit.
Yeah.
So it did.
Because that's the thing. Honestly, part of it is, I think we need to change the naming of what we're talking about. Because when people think phone, most people still think back to when you had your flip phone. Because I remember flip phones.
Of course.
So half the things that you would do on your computer every day, you now do on your phone.
Right.
Nobody expects your computer to last that long.
Nope.
If you're doing all those things, but we expect our phones to now all of a sudden, like to have that same battery life and durability and all of these things that they had in the early 2000s, but also do everything a computer does.
Right. Yeah, the naming convention should change. I told someone this last night, and I'm gonna give them a shout out. Chris Rock's photography. She does photos here in Richmond, trying to get some promo, but she also does work with a phone company. Now I'm gonna, for business purposes and for PR, I never like to put businesses' names because it's just me following the rules. But I did. I'll promote the photo shoot because that's her personal business. But that being said, like, she works with a company in, the launching of the new phone. Their sales were not very, it was like their official launch night day was yesterday. And there weren't as many calls coming in regarding the new phone. And I had to step back and think about it. If you really look at the last couple of years of phones, the last time that we really saw a phone that really spiked and caught a lot of people's attention, in my opinion, was the 7.
Yeah.
The 7 and the 7 Plus did what was needed. Like I said, that was also the controversy of, oh my God, I don't have a headphone jack. You're giving me this stupid dongle, and if I lose it, I got to pay $20 for another one or $10 for another one. When in reality, you don't have to have it if you don't need it. But most importantly, it's good to have for the sake of its purpose, which I think when I bought mine, when mine came with the phone, what I ended up doing was I said, you know what? Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go on Amazon. I'm gonna buy this. It looks like a headphone like plug, like it looks like an aux cut, and you just put it on your keychain. And I always have my dongle with me. So in the event that I ever, in the event that I ever need, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you good.
I was gonna say mine's pretty sure it's still in the box. You never touched it, never opened it.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I would never knock anyone who doesn't need to use it, because most of us are either going to do one or two things. We're either going to have the default headphones that came with the phone, or you're going to use, in most cases, because most companies have been geared towards understanding where we are as consumers. Let's just make Bluetooth headphones and also make them affordable for consumers. Like, you can go to Walmart and get a pair of headphones for like Bluetooth headphones for like less than $20. And they're not going to work that great, but they're still going to fit that. I don't have a headphone jack, but I can still use what I have.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I've never had to buy headphones as much as I'm a musician because of Apple.
Okay.
Because back when they did the whole, when they started this whole school promo, you could get a free pair of Beats with any purchase. Okay. So I got a pair of Beats Solos for my iPhone 6S, I think, way back in the day. And then a couple years ago, I got Beats Studios from buying an iPad Pro. So I've never had to buy headphones. They've always been wireless. I've never had an issue.
I'm in a limbo. I'm really in limbo on getting the Studios. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I have the Solos now. Like, I'm using the Solos right now for recording. But I have used, like, normally whenever I'm doing my actual, like with the Yeti and everything, I'll usually have the Pros, which are really helpful for how I listen to music. So there's that. with the iPhone 11, do you think we're going to see, like, do you feel like when it actually comes out, that you're going to see a lot of people with that phone? Like, once it's officially on the street? Okay. Tell me more.
I have seen, especially in the last little while, so many people with 4-inch iPhones. I was baffled because I'm very much into tech. So, I watch all of those videos. I know what's going on. I keep up.
Right.
I've been shocked to see how many people are still on the iPhone 5S or the SE, and they really don't care.
Right.
Because they don't need their phone to do 5 million things.
Yeah.
They don't even know what a good quality picture looks like anymore. So their little iPhone 5S with whatever camera quality that had at the time is still perfectly fine for what they need to do.
Right.
And or I'll even see professionals because they have their professional camera. So the camera, they don't care about the camera on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
And they're living their lives. So people will buy it, especially the lower end one, if their contract's up.
Right.
But otherwise, people don't actually care.
Okay.
And I think that's why they went to this whole pro moniker, because they're trying to sell to people like me who care.
Yeah.
But the market in general, smartphones is shrinking.
Yes.
The pace of innovation is shrinking.
Thank you.
It's almost akin to, I like to compare it to Nintendo.
Okay.
If you look at, like, the NES, the SNES, the 64, the GameCube, like, those were giant jumps. But if you look at, like, the Wii to the Wii U to the Switch,
not much of a big difference.
Like, I mean, they ported half the Wii U game, so
yeah,
it's really not that big of a difference. So we're getting to that point with phones that every year is not a huge difference. So I have an iPhone 8 right now. I'm not crying over it.
Yeah.
I won't change my phone until, like, I keep up enough because I care a little bit.
Yeah.
But when my phone contract's up, I'll probably upgrade to the 11.
Right.
But I'm not sitting here like, oh my gosh, the 11 comes out next week. I need to get it, like, right now.
Right. And that's fair. Like, that's the mindset it should be. Only because they're really not, there's nothing that's being pushed that's like, yo, you got to run out and buy this phone. And it was tough because the guy who they have go up there to talk, and it's funny because we talked about a lot of what was mentioned during the keynote, but we really haven't talked about the keynote itself. Because the keynote, they present things phenomenal. If you're not really sure or not aware of what to expect, you'll look at it and say, oh man, all this stuff looks so nice. And then you're like, okay, when you actually get it, it's not going to be half of what they're showing you. And it's not in a bad way. It's just, it's not, what they're showing is stuff that you're not going to use the phone for at all, or the devices that they present. I know when the guy came up and he was talking about the 3 cameras, I'm just looking at it like, why do I need this many cameras? Like, how much more detail are we trying to get with selfies? Like, I know we're trying to get the 4K video and, like, high-end recordings, but is it really worth it?
Like, I see it on 2 ends, though. I really do. Because there's people like you and me who I thought at first the same thing. I was like, just use 3 cameras on the phone. At what point am I just going to go bring up my camera, which has a multitude of lenses, and take a picture? That's in one.
Right.
So that I can edit it however I want to edit it. But then, at the same time, I think about people like my brother, because we're 10 years apart. It's like a huge generational gap. And I could see him wanting to create something and whipping out his phone and having the flexibility of the ultra-wide and the wide and the normal lens. He could do so many different creative things with that.
Right.
And maybe that'll foster that love of creating, and then eventually he'll move up to a bigger camera.
Right.
So, but that's the kind of the problem is they're not attacking it. When you call something the 11R, iPhone 11, the iPhone Pro, and the iPhone Pro Max. Someone like my brother, if he was getting a phone, he'd be getting the 11.
Right.
He doesn't think he's a pro. So he's not going up there to the pro level.
Yeah.
And those are the people who would most benefit from having those things.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, the average person doesn't need, like for me, last year when I got the Max solely because of storage and also because of the battery life. And I guess the evident part was the screen. If you really look at the front of the phone, nothing changed. I think they made they did enhance the camera as far as now you can record. Like, I think you can do video. No, I'm sorry. You can take a photo, and while taking a photo, you can transition it into video, which that's a feature that's going to come with. They're going to put that on like one of the iOS updates. If I'm taking a blind stab in the dark. But all of that being said, I mean, it wasn't that Apple wasn't innovative in what they presented at the keynote. It just wasn't as massively innovative as it was perceived to be. And I mean, we're in a generation or an era now where everything gets leaked before we even get to see the keynote. Like, they were talking about what Apple was going to show us back in like June and July. Because there's sources there's always going to be someone who has, I won't say the sauce, but someone that has the information to say, hey, here's what you can expect to see at this coming event. And most of the times, whatever they mention usually happens. Engadget, I don't know if it was either Engadget or the Verge. And by the way, before, I'm going to remember, because I'm going to say this so that way if I say it, it'll remind me to do it during the editing. I'm going to share a link that shows the entire keynote in like 17 minutes. It's like 12 or 17 minutes. I
think it's The Verge that does that every year.
Yes. And The Verge has become my tech backup because I love Engadget, don't get me wrong. And they're not the best source, but I always will use Kotaku for some information. But The Verge, when it comes to you getting like spot on, here's what's going on with tech, and of course CNET, like you can't leave them off of the radar. But The Verge usually gets it right, or they usually are keeping you informed as to what's coming or what has happened. So yeah, like that's kind of the cut and dry version. Like I said, said company, sales they really weren't getting a lot of calls in sales of the new phone. So that's very telling, because when phones are released, they're looking for a point of, hey, we should be selling X number of phones, or we should expect this many sales. And if they don't hit that mark, then it's like, I mean, what can you do? You can't drop. I mean, dropping the price might get folks in, but if the consumer isn't as pressed on the phone and it's nothing that's really compelling them towards it, why buy it?
Yeah.
Was there
honestly, the saddest part was that the most interesting part of that entire keynote was the retail section.
Okay.
At least for me.
So let's talk about it.
Just because that is, to me, where Apple is killing it.
Yeah.
I remember even being in like grade 9, and me and my friends would go to the mall and we'd go into the Apple store. Everyone knows we're not buying anything, but we would spend hours in there, whether it be on photo booths or just, surfing the web or just talking to Apple people. Like, we would do that for fun.
Yeah.
And that's good for business. Today at Apple, that is so smart because you're teaching people for free. You're teaching them on your product, so that's how they know how to do things. So what are they going to go buy?
What they have or what they're working with, yeah.
what they know how to use already.
Right.
If I learned how to edit videos on iMovie, I'm not going to go buy a Windows machine so that I have to relearn how to do everything all over again, right. and or have to pay to get taught.
That's true.
And it's where they shine. I've made a video about this, so I did a full view of where they can improve. But that's where the magic came back for me in that keynote. The rest of the keynote, it's been the most tech spec oriented keynote I think I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. Every time I watch like a new Apple keynote, I always go back and watch the 2007 keynote where they introduced the iPhone. Mm-hmm. And there's just a magic there. Like, obviously, I already know every single detail of the original iPhone. I've watched that keynote 5 million times.
Right.
But it's still exciting. There's still a suspense. It's still, like, I can watch it and not be bored. Whereas this new keynote, I was bored several times. I was bored every single time there were 3 demos in a row about games I didn't care about.
Right. Did Now you said it was the 07 keynote was your go-to?
Yeah.
Okay, and was that the last one Steve did?
No, that was just the first iPhone.
Okay, got you. I may need to go back and look at like his last keynote that he presented. Cause and like I said, I know we heavily made this Apple keynote podcast, but I do like even before I owned an iPhone, I still would go and do the breakdown of, okay, let's see what Apple's doing. Like, even with me and like being on the Apple side, it's okay, let's see what Samsung's doing. Let's see what Google is doing. Like, I want to see what's keeping the others afloat and what's causing, my interest to be tickled or fancied or intrigued or whatever the case may be. And a lot of times you don't get that often without because what they didn't have then that we have now is social media. Like, social media is how people really get into it. Like, this year, because I wasn't able to watch it live, I stayed away from social media because I knew people were going to be tweeting and talking about it the whole time. And I'm like, I will just wait until I watch it myself. And then when I found a bunch of videos and pictures, like, I don't even know if I sent them to you. There were a lot of pictures that was mocking the new camera. They showed one of them where it was like the future of the iPhone, and it was like it had like a whole slew of cameras on the back of it, looking like almost like the cheese grater in a sense. They showed it where it was supposed to look like FBI, CIA, and Homeland Security. I said, yo, they have to stop. But it's...
That's the other thing. Why do people care? Like, Apple can do something and the whole world will freak out, and Samsung could do the exact same thing, and it's not a big deal. Like, the headphone jack. Apple gets rid of the headphone jack, and people are insulting them up and down. It's the biggest thing. Mm-hmm. Half the phones that Samsung released this year didn't have a headphone jack.
Right.
Nobody cared.
Yep.
Or the Note 7 blew up, or the Fold. The Galaxy Fold, that I don't even know if it still is out yet.
The Fold folded.
And yet people still talk about, the iPhone 4 and you're holding it wrong. Like, every single time.
Yeah.
Or Bendgate. Like, Bendgate was... The Note 7 blew up, and nobody talks about it, but people are still doing bend tests on every single Apple product because one of them bent.
Yep. So I'm gonna answer that, and then we'll make that. Then we'll run into my final segment. The reason why and my roommate and I have had this conversation like multiple times. People are waiting to see Apple fail, and the one way that you want to see a company fail is by pointing out flaws and blemishes, not that they're keeping. Because if you want to really look at it and think about it, Apple has kept Samsung on their toes and vice versa. Because at the end of the day, as a consumer, and let me make sure, because I always I say those two and I always forget. Google has come in and still are keeping their consumers as well. So you're coming
Yeah.
out with products like a few years ago. I was an indifferent Apple fan. I'll say that. I think at the time I still owned like a Microsoft Zune, showing my age. I had the Zune. I had like a pair of Beats, but they weren't like high-end Beats. And I just kind of kept everything chill. One of the guys who worked with me had an iPhone. He was like, yeah, I'm team iPhone, da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, okay, you're team iPhone, but what's your email? And he would say whatever his email was. And I was like, it's at Gmail, right? He was like, yeah. I'm like, so you still have the balance of the imbalance. Like, I don't know many people who have an apple.com email address. That's just my 2%.
I do.
That's what I said. It's 2%.
I use my iCloud every day.
Yeah. Like if it was a push for me to do it, I would pay to do iCloud. I just found alternatives. Like for photos, I use Google Photos. I had somebody introduce that to me, and it was like, I'm good. But it's also, for those, for having that option, it's knowing that you can't knock the consumer for what they do or don't use. And sometimes people spend more time knocking consumers who are Apple users because, y'all think y'all all that because y'all got AirPods. You think you're all that because your headphones are exclusive to Apple products. And it's like, technically they're not. You can buy a pair of people sometimes fail to realize this. You can buy a pair of AirPods and still use them with an Android device. The pairing is going to be a little weird, but it still can be done. So that's my take on it is just, we want to see a company fail, but Apple's going to continue to thrive right along with Samsung, right along with Google, right along with LG, right along with all those companies, even Hawaii, like when they go through their little debacles and confusions, like those companies are going to still thrive because every consumer does not have to, like a consumer doesn't have to have a device from every company. If a person is team Apple, they're team Apple. If a person is team Droid, they're team Droid. Like I'm team, I want my stuff to work. That's me.
Amen.
So it's, like I say it all the time. I love the little iHome or whatever the speaker that Apple made. I will never buy it. And I'm only saying I would never buy it because it's a limited speaker in what I need it to be used for. Because most cases, what we're doing with stuff, it's like we don't even use it. Like, we talked about this earlier. Like, we don't use things to its maximum potential. So, and I'm like talking the whole time. Like, I don't mean to take over I know I'm normal. They hear me all the time.
No, you're good.
So, but yeah, that's.
I agree with people with the speaker part of that. Like, for me, especially as a musician, like, yes, the sound quality on it is amazing. But my dream speakers are Tech LS50 wireless.
Okay.
Right? Like, if I'm going to put money I'm not going to put money towards the HomePod. If you gave me a way to plug in, like, almost like an Echo, but the Apple version into, like, test speakers, I'd be here for it all day.
Right.
But it's almost like Apple tries to make these pro things that are weirdly, like, they're not pro enough for the pro people, but then they're too pro for the not pro people.
Right.
And then they're expensive.
Yeah, the cost is the killer. The cost is always going to be the killer with Apple, and that's what you hear people talk about the least is the price. They'll talk more about the flaws than they will about the price. The price always comes in because that's standard. Apple fans will talk about it before anybody else, but the actual flaws and issues that Apple has, that's what they'll run away with more than anything. All right, so we're near the hour, and I know people's attention spans gets like, all right, y'all done talked about a lot of stuff, but wrap it up. I had stuff to do. Before you go, I have two things that I need. One, I'm going to give you a chance to do social plugs in a bit. But before that,
okay.
at the end of the show, because this is called The Pass, I always like to give people that join the show an opportunity to send a good message, like send everybody off with a good message. It doesn't have to be about Apple. It doesn't have to be about music. It can be about whatever you want it to be. It could be something that's like your personal inspiration. But it's just a message to pass along to the listeners of the show.
I would say be you. And I know that sounds cheesy, I know that sounds corny, but like, no, I've noticed a lot in the current landscape of media. Sometimes, like, people are mixing up opinions as facts, or just if there's a frequency of an opinion and you might not feel that same way, people feel pressure to just, like, kind of go with the mob. And I think that's dangerous, and I think that makes our world boring and all those kinds of things. So be you. Stand up for what you believe in, whether other people like it or not.
Right.
Stay true to your opinion. Be vocal about your opinion, even if hate comes back on you for your opinion. Doesn't matter if it's political, with music, with anything else. Just stay yourself, because at the end of the day, when you look in the mirror, you should be able to be comfortable with who you are and not putting on a mask just to not cause controversy in the rest of the world.
Okay. I like that. That's a simple, be you, that ain't cheesy. That's actually legit, because that's, a lot of us really don't know how to be ourselves. And that kind of almost is a unique story for me, because when I first did my podcast, I was trying to be me, but I didn't know who me was. And now here it is, I'm almost 200 something episodes in, and I mean, almost 300 episodes. And now I've got this down where I've been myself, and it's made what I do more creative. So that's a good message. I like that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
No problem. My message is to don't, you know what, since we're on the keynote, I'm going to give this, because people don't know this with technology, and I think consumers have forgotten this. Even with them revising and working on products the way they have, and it's, you know, when you get it, it works out and everything's good. Never buy the first batch of products.
Amen.
I know everyone has to have the newest. They have to have the latest. They got to be on it. But let the first batch be wonky and junky and clunky and messy, and then go and get that next one, the next wave that has actually gone through the proper testing, gone through enough complaining, because the first few weeks on Twitter, when everyone officially gets their iPhones, is going to be interesting. I know it is, because everyone is going to want to show what they have new, what they're doing, what they're not doing, things of that sort. But yeah, and it's not just with Apple, it's with anything. Like, I'm an Xbox guy. When the Xbox One first dropped, I was like, no, let them horrible versions that just released come out, be trash, go through its motions, and then the next batch that come in, I'm with y'all.
You don't need to be an early adopter, because all early adopters are glorified beta testers who have to pay a higher price.
Yep. And they have to, and that's when the Apple Store gets crowded with a lot of people who just got a phone and they don't know what to do anything with, or they did something that they don't realize they did, and go through that motion. Yeah. Plugs, social plugs. Promote whatever you want, and you can send them to me afterwards, so I'll make sure I got everything spelled and written correctly.
Okay, so basically I'm Dani Alexandria everywhere, but it's a little bit confusing. So my YouTube channel is youtube.com/Dani Alexandria. Dani is spelled Dani. Apparently that's a thing that people don't know how to spell. So it's just the first half of Danielle. It's not that complicated. My Instagram is just Instagram.com/Dani Alexandria Music. My Twitter is Twitter.com/Dani Alex Music, because character limits And I have my podcast on all of the platforms, including Spotify, called Let's Talk Creative.
Okay. Nice. And soon and very soon, we're going to be doing website maintenance. We're working on that from my end. Once I can, we'll get that all. That's going to be our off-air discussion. But thank you for being on the show. I do appreciate you being patient with my tech chaos and everything trying to go crazy. I'm going to see what's what. Hopefully my Yeti hasn't gone. And I know you had a resource, which I'll definitely link with on getting that part squared away. As I always share at the end, and I it's weird because I always double promo it, so I'm not going to double promo it this time, but continue to listen to the shows. Next week, I believe I have another guest coming on. I got to solidify that. If not, it's a lot of sports to catch up on because when I take a week off for interviews, sports goes chaotic and there's other stuff that's happened. We might have an Antonio Brown part 2. We'll stay tuned on that. But all of that being said, I am your host, BT. This is The Pass, and we're signing out. Y'all have a good one.
Bye.
Bye. Another episode is in the books. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. As I always share, if you'd like to get into podcasting, you can check out Spreaker.com. And if you're looking to invest in a microphone or if you're looking to genuinely start with recording, I use the Blue Yeti microphone, but you may prefer to do the Samson Meteor. Just know that if it's your craft and it's something that you're meant to do it and do it well. That's my main thing to tell people about 2019. Do it and be reliable. Y'all take it easy.